A positive North Atlantic Oscillation will start to dominate the weather across the UK and the North Atlantic during the next few days. But what does that mean? What will be the result for the weather we experience? And how long will it last? I'm going to be answering those questions in this week's Met Office Deep Dive. Thank you for joining me. We do these every Tuesday on our YouTube channel and in various other places as well. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do. And tell your friends about these in-depth meteorological masterpieces. It's just the first M word that came to my head, but who am I to call these masterpieces? I'll let you be the judge of that. And if you do think they are masterpieces, spread the love. It's Tuesday, the 10th of March, 2026. 43 years ago today, Bonnie Tyler was topping the charts with Total Eclipse of the Heart. Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. Gandhi was the film everyone was heading to the cinema to watch. And in a hospital in Cardiff, I was being born. And what better way to celebrate my birthday this year than to talk about the two-dimensional probability density function that you can see on the screen here, because it's an excellent way to summarise the weather during the next week and beyond for the UK. Now, I mentioned that we're going to experience a positive North Atlantic Oscillation, and I could just effectively say that means the weather's going to be changeable, mixed, unsettled, and leave it at that. But this is the deep dive. What's the fun in just summarising it in that way when we can talk complicated graphs and charts instead? That's what these are for. For shorter range forecasts and for shorter forecasts, there are other videos available on our YouTube channel. But in this instance, I want to deep dive into what this says about our weather, both for this time of year, but at other times of year as well. Essentially, this is a plot that shows the strength of the index of the North Atlantic Oscillation, going from the negative North Atlantic Oscillation on the left to the positive North Atlantic Oscillation on the right. And then it shows the strength of blocking over Europe. Anti-blocking, or no blocking whatsoever, at the bottom, and then positive blocking, so a very blocked atmosphere over Europe at the top. And then what happens is the computer plots where various different 51 ensemble simulations have the forecast over the next week or so. So this is a summary of the next week, Tuesday to Tuesday, how much these computer models are simulating a positive North Atlantic Oscillation versus a negative, positive blocking versus negative blocking, and then they know where to plot these different ensemble runs. So there are 51 plotted on here. Before I get into what the forecast is saying, let's explain what these terms mean. North Atlantic Oscillation and blocking. So I'm going to hide that chart and draw a few squiggles on the map. Now, I think regular viewers will know what the North Atlantic Oscillation is. We've done a number of videos on it, but just a quick summary for those that need some refreshing. And essentially, in an average setup, we have low pressure over Iceland. Let's just get rid of the arrows. There we go. Low pressure over Iceland, high pressure over the Azores. That's the average setup. That would be called a neutral North Atlantic Oscillation. Now, if we get even lower pressure over Iceland and even higher pressure over the Azores, then that strengthens the westerly airflow. Then we call it a positive North Atlantic Oscillation. So in that case, we get a stronger, more powerful jet stream. Now, I mentioned the blocking over Europe, and this is another thing that is displayed on the chart. And this, again, talks about lows and highs. But in this case, if we get a big ridge over Europe that blocks the jet stream, then you've got a positive blocking situation. So let's draw a big H. Now, it could be over Scandinavia, it could be over the UK, it could be over Central Europe. But what it's doing is it's blocking the jet stream. So the net result is the jet stream doesn't dive straight through the UK and into Europe. It gets blocked. Boom. Goes up there somewhere, perhaps. So this is a case where you've got a positive North Atlantic Oscillation with a positive blocking over Europe. Actually, this is reasonably common in the summer because you've still got the westerly airflow, but you get a greater chance of higher pressure and heat building over Europe. And in this case, we call it a summer North Atlantic Oscillation as opposed to a winter North Atlantic Oscillation. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But in this case, you get a lot of fine weather, still get some mixed weather across northwestern parts of the UK, some weak weather fronts moving through, but effectively the lows are taken through Iceland into the Norwegian Sea and beyond. They're blocked from going into Europe by the high, a greater chance of some warm, dry, sunny weather coming into the south and east of the UK at times. So this is positive, positive. Now, in the case where we've got a positive North Atlantic Oscillation and negative blocking over Europe, or in other words, perhaps a big area of low pressure or a trough in the upper atmosphere, then something quite different happens with the jet stream in this case. It doesn't get blocked. In fact, it gets encouraged to move straight through Europe. So now we've got this straight jet stream, a powerful jet stream coming through the Atlantic and ploughing straight through the UK and into Europe. This is a case where we've got a positive North Atlantic Oscillation and negative blocking over Europe. So we've got plus, minus, and this is more like a winter time or an autumn time North Atlantic Oscillation because the jet stream just goes straight through. You've got low pressure there. You get low, 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 lots of mixed changeable weather and can be quite stormy across northern Europe in this case. So those are the two types of North Atlantic Oscillation generally. But what if we've got a negative North Atlantic Oscillation? Well, in that case, we might have high pressure over Iceland, or we might have lower than average pressure over Iceland, so a weak low. It doesn't have to be high pressure, it's just weaker than normal. And we might have lower than normal pressure over the Azores. It again may not be necessarily be low pressure, but lower than the high that we get typically. In this situation, the jet stream will be weaker. It will be more meandering. It hasn't got that pressure difference to really get it fired up. And in this instance, the jet stream may split. It may go to the north over here, and there might be another branch that comes through here into southern Europe. So this is a negative North Atlantic Oscillation situation, a weaker, more meandering jet stream, perhaps split in a couple of components rather than firing straight across the Atlantic. And if we combine into the mix those two different types of blocking over Europe, so that let's say, for example, we've got the high pressure block over Europe, so we might have high pressure over Scandinavia or over northern Europe. Well, if we've got that, the jet stream is again blocked, so it doesn't go into Europe. It might be blocked so much that it comes further south again, perhaps around here, joining up with this jet stream coming over here. So this is a case where we've got negative North Atlantic Oscillation, positive blocking, and the result, perhaps, easterly or northeasterly winds for the UK. So this is the kind of winter weather pattern where we get some of the most extreme cold weather in the UK. Now, what if we had the negative North Atlantic Oscillation and negative blocking? So in this case, we've got a trough or low pressure over Europe. Well, what would happen here is that the jet stream does move into Europe, but it comes in from the north perhaps, and you've got northwesterly or northerly winds. It could link up with that slice of the jet stream there. So here we've got weak lows coming in, perhaps giving the UK some northerlies or northwesterlies, and low pressure focused over Europe. So that's a case where we've got negative, negative. Hope that all makes sense. Feel free to rewind and play it again, or watch the next bit in which I'll show some real life examples of all of that sort of thing. So let's put the chart back on. And what I've done here, this is really speaking in generalizations, so I've summed up what each of these mean. We've got the positive, positive, negative, negative, etc., etc. So the negative North Atlantic Oscillation can mean a weak jet stream. That's what I've written here, weak jet in both instances. Might also mean a strong jet stream that's quite far south shifted. So you've still got higher pressure over Iceland, lower pressure over the Azores. The jet stream's still pretty powerful, but it's south shifted. So it's not always weak jet. Like I say, these are generalizations. On the top, we've got blocked weather patterns over Europe. On the bottom, we've got not blocked. So let's focus on the negative North Atlantic Oscillation first of all, because this isn't what we're going to see over the next week or two. And a weak jet stream, or a south-shifted jet stream, but Europe hasn't got a block, well, that typically looks something like this. Similar to what I drew on the chart, we've got this large area of high pressure out in the Atlantic extending towards Iceland, low pressure close to the Azores, hence the negative North Atlantic Oscillation. But we've also got all these lows and weather fronts over Europe. So effectively we've got northerly, northeasterly winds, weak fronts coming through. In this kind of situation, this is the 13th of March, you can get some wintry showers, 13th of March last year, sorry. Wintry showers over the UK, so it's pretty cold, but not as cold as it can be if, back on, if we get a weak jet stream and it's blocked. And this is your classic. This was the beast from the east. So it's a classic example of negative North Atlantic Oscillation. So you've got higher pressure near the Iceland, lower pressure near the Azores, but you've also got higher pressure over Europe. In this case, it's Scandinavia. So these two highs link up and the jet stream basically reversed in this case. Easterlies, freezing cold, beast from the east, lots of snows. This was taken Friday the 2nd of March, 2018. Now, important thing to point out here is that you can get those two things happening, negative North Atlantic Oscillation, positive blocking over Europe, and not get a beast from the east. Indeed, we had a very similar setup for the first couple of months of this year. But the difference was, although we had low pressure close to the southwest and we had higher pressure over Greenland and Scandinavia, the orientation was such that we had southeasterlies, persistent southeasterlies, not these winds from Siberia, so it wasn't that cold. It was really cold over Scandinavia, over Central and Northeast Europe, but it wasn't for the UK. So in that case, we didn't have a beast from the east situation. We didn't have widespread below freezing temperatures and snowfall. So it just goes to show that you can have the indices in a certain position, you can have everything lined up, but it doesn't always guarantee this kind of weather setup. But this is the kind of extreme that can result from a negative North Atlantic Oscillation and blocking over Europe. So those are the two examples of having a weak or south-shifted jet. That's not what we're seeing in the next week or two, so I'm going to focus a bit more now on instances of positive North Atlantic Oscillation. And in one instance, you might have less blocking over Europe. So you've not got the high pressure over Europe or Scandinavia or over the UK to block the strong jet stream. And that's what this looks like. And you can see here, you've got lows coming in from the Atlantic, this straight westerly flow, and these fronts just go straight through Europe. It's not an ideal example because there is still some ridging over southern into central parts of Europe, but nevertheless, you've got more or less these lows, one after the other, straight through the UK, a very, what we call mobile westerly airflow. So that's where you've got low over Iceland, low over Europe. What about strong jet stream, but blocking over Europe? Often that can look like this, not always, but often that can look like this. We've got this high pressure, and this is an example from 23rd of March 2020. High pressure over Scandinavia, over Eastern Europe. You've still got low pressure, 964 over Iceland. High pressure over the Azores, 1028. So you've still got this strong jet coming in, but it gets deflected. High pressure over Europe, so the fronts and the low pressure systems swing to the north east. And this is what I mean by a summer North Atlantic Oscillation setup. So you've got still a jet stream, still this westerly airflow, but higher pressure over Europe, and this is late March, so it's becoming more common. This kind of weather pattern starts to become more common end of March, into spring, and into the summer. The fronts and low pressure systems get deflected. Still mixed weather across northwestern parts of the UK, particularly the north and west of Scotland. The further southeast you are, the drier, sunnier and warmer it tends to be, albeit with a few weak weather fronts occasionally pushing through. So those are the two types of positive North Atlantic oscillation to bear in mind when I talk through the forecast over the next couple of weeks. We've got one where the lows zip through because there's nothing stopping them. They go through the UK into Europe. Band of rain showers, and so on. Rinse and repeat. And then there's this one where you do have something weakening them or stopping them because you've got a block over Europe. So you've still got the lows coming in, but they get deflected to the northwest. Now, press that, lots of buttons to press here, bringing the forecast back into it. And this is a summary of the 51 computer simulations from the European model. It plots all of these ensemble members onto this chart depending on whether they've got a strong or weak jet, it's blocked or not blocked over Europe. And it's come out with this for Tuesday the 9th of March to Tuesday the 15th of March. Or was it Monday the 15th of March? And it's showing this. So quite clearly, we've got a few clusters here. That means that the models are kind of clustered in various camps, but virtually all of them are on this side of the fence, positive North Atlantic oscillation. So we know there's a decent jet stream driving low pressure in from the west. But there is some uncertainty here in terms of the blocking. How much higher pressure over Europe will deflect those lows, or how much low pressure over Europe will welcome them in. Now you can see a few clusters there. None of them are strongly blocked, none of them are strongly not blocked. So it's something of a non-bias, effectively, over Europe, something quite flat. And if I just take that off, you can see that is indeed the case with the jet stream. Let's go to Thursday when it's a bit more apparent because it really kicks in during Wednesday. Strong jet stream coming in from the west. Yeah, it goes through Europe. It goes a little bit to the north there over Scandinavia. So it does get deflected somewhat, but not to the extreme. We've still got these lows zipping through the UK. So it is, as the chart suggests, something in between. What about how that might change? Because these charts are available for the next few weeks. Mid-March. This is the 16th of March to the 22nd of March. And again, we've got a similar distribution here. Fewer clusters, so that means that more of the computer models are in a similar camp, although more spread out across the screen there. You get more of a dilution, I guess you'd call it, when you go further ahead, because there's less of a strong signal, obviously, the further ahead you go. But again, strongly North Atlantic oscillation in the positive area, and a bias there towards less blocking over Europe, but there are still some models that push it into more of a blocking phase over Europe. So not too far removed from what we're seeing. However, there is that trend through next week for it to become more blocked over Europe. And I say that because if I put the following week's graphic on, you can see more of them are into this positive blocking space and heading more to the left, which is a weaker jet stream or south-shifted jet stream, in other words, a negative North Atlantic oscillation. So they're moving, this is the last week of March, they're moving more towards here. So in simple terms, what does that mean? Some of you might be asking about the colours, by the way. The stronger the colours, the more of the computer models are distributed. The colours just change from each chart, one chart to the next, to differentiate them. But yeah, the darker colours basically are where more of the computer models are sitting. And actually, just before I summarise this, there are two clusters here, interestingly, for the final week of March. There's this one that has a stronger jet stream, NAO+, and there's this one that has a much weaker jet stream and more blocking over Europe. So that's interesting. I guess there's a bit of uncertainty, a bit of a divergence, two camps emerging for the last week of March in terms of jet stream being strong, more mobile activity across the UK, versus a weaker jet stream, more blocking in the vicinity of the UK. But just to summarise the trend that we're seeing from these charts and how the North Atlantic oscillation may change, And the blocking over Europe may change over the next few weeks. At the moment, like I say, we've got this strong jet stream pushing in. It tends to move lows through the UK into Europe. Then there's that signal through next week for that to continue for a time, but towards the end of next week, more higher pressure scenarios start to emerge in the vicinity of the UK, close to the UK, perhaps blocking or weakening or deflecting the jet stream a little more. And then the week after, last week of March, there's that stronger signal for more blocking over Europe and less of a powerful jet stream, but still the chance, still a cluster of ensemble members that keep the jet stream a little stronger. So yeah, I just thought that was an interesting chart to summarise the weather this week and for the following 2 weeks. And it is a bit tricky to get your head around initially. Certainly took me a while, but it does help to paint the bigger picture and to describe the differences between various flavours of unsettled weather, because we could just describe the weather as unsettled during the next week or so, but it's a very different flavour of unsettled compared with the first 2 months of the year, where we had a south-shifted jet stream and more blocking over Europe. Now we've got the jet stream coming in on a more typical path, low pressure over Iceland, and it's less blocked over Europe, so these weather systems are moving through. Spells of rain followed by showers, followed by further spells of rain. And that effectively starts tonight. Here is the weather front that opens the door to that stronger jet stream. You can see it quite clearly there. The jet stream, by the way, has been activated by quite severe storms over the US in recent days. Some of those storms have made the news. Now it's active and it's heading our way, and it's on Tuesday night into Wednesday that it's picking up these areas of low pressure and sending them towards the UK. This area of low pressure in particular, you can see the tightly packed isobars across the north and northwest of Scotland, and that is cause for concern because the winds are really going to pick up. So here's the wind gust graphic for today. It's a blustery day today as a band of rain crosses the UK. Then winds ease off for a little bit later in the afternoon before Tuesday evening. This swathe of strong winds comes in as the jet stream fires up, sends us these areas of low pressure. And here's the core of strongest winds, 80 plus out to sea, but thankfully not quite that strong when those winds hit the north and northwest of Scotland. Early hours of Wednesday, we're talking about mid to high 60s generally. For the Western Isles, the west coast, the northwest coast, Orkney, mid to high 60s, peaking early hours in the west and northwest, and then for Orkney peaking mid-morning. So mid to high 60s generally, but the risk in some exposed spots of mid to high 70s. There is a warning in force. First warning we've had for a few days. If I skipped it, there it is. That's the shape of the warning. So it's the north and northwest of Scotland seeing those very strong winds overnight. But that's not the end of the strong winds. That's valid, by the way, midnight to midday, overnight tonight into midday tomorrow. But you can see how it stays windy. These are the maximum wind gusts for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday into Friday. So because we've got that increase in the westerly winds, the more powerful jet stream, low after low after low, of course, it's going to be very blustery over the next few days. So the risk of gales and severe gales in the north and northwest of Scotland on Tuesday night tonight, and then stays windy through Wednesday into Thursday. Those winds are more focused across Irish seacoast into the north of England, West Wales, the southwest. A very blustery day across all parts. Friday again, another gusty day to come. Those winds accompanied by spells of rain at times as well. So we've got the wet weather moving in for the rest of Tuesday. This graphic here shows the weather at the same time, but across different charts. So we've got the big picture here, low pressure to the northwest, weather front moving in, pushed along by a strong jet stream. And here's that band of rain, a wet night for all of us, heavy rain moving in from the west, followed by showers and those winds picking up across the north and northwest of Scotland. By the time we get to Wednesday itself, you can see the rain's out of the way. We're back to sunshine and showers, the most frequent showers, as is often the case in this setup across Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Fewer showers further south and east, plenty of bright weather, but it's blustery. Strongest winds across the north of Scotland. Then the winds increase again, as you can see, with the next band of rain coming in. So more wet weather arriving Wednesday night into Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushed along, like you can see, by a strong jet stream. And then this swathe of gales crossing the UK during Thursday, straddling the UK. Thursday's a very unsettled day. Heavy rain across northern England, North Wales, showers into the north of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and outbreaks of rain further south as well. And a blustery day with that. But once that front's out of the way, we're into much colder air. You can see the jet stream dive south of the UK. Temperatures drop off. And Friday morning is the nadir of the temperatures. So Friday morning's the cold spot. Cold enough, in fact. Let me show you the temperatures, how they compare with average. These are the daytime highs, and you can see how many places are above average on Tuesday, closer to average Wednesday, below average for Scotland and Northern Ireland on Thursday. By Friday, most of us are below or well below average. And it's on Friday morning that the coldest air moves through, and we can see that by this graphic here, which shows the height of the freezing level above sea level. And this is a really useful metric for determining where any snow is possible. And yes, snow is possible in places on Friday morning, and you can see why. We've got the colder air moving in on Thursday morning across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Much of England and Wales, green colours. That indicates that the freezing level is above 1,000 or even 1,400 metres, which would mean that virtually nowhere would get snow from this situation. But once you get into the blues, we're talking about hill snow. Once you get into the greys, tends to be snow at lower levels. So a general rule of thumb that we use, you subtract 200 metres from these heights. It varies depending on the intensity of the precipitation and the profile of the atmosphere, but general rule of thumb, subtract 200 metres, and that's where the precipitation will be falling as snow as opposed to rain. So into the blues, hill snow, and then by Friday morning we're into the greys across Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England, blues elsewhere. So what we can say for Friday morning is lots of showers coming in, first of all, across the north and northwest of the UK. And those showers, they'll be heavy, they'll be fairly lively, rumbles of thunder, gusty winds, but also they'll be within this colder air. And so certainly some snow falling and settling across northern hills, but the chances of some snow during Friday morning at lower levels, not a great deal. And through the morning on Friday, you can see that the blues return fairly widely, and so that snow level is lifting through the day. By the time we get to Saturday, it's still cold, but it's not as cold. It's more of a hill snow situation. And just to give you an idea of snow depths on Friday morning, you can see it's mostly hill snow across northern parts of the UK, but some small patches perhaps at lower levels. Like I say, not a great deal. These are showers that we're rattling through, mix of rain, sleet, hail, snow, I suspect, in these showers. Typical, very kind of mixed March weather. So I wouldn't get too excited. After all, this is a positive North Atlantic Oscillation. You've got these Atlantic winds coming in. You never get much snow at lower levels in these kinds of situations, these polar maritime air masses. And so, yeah, it's mostly hill snow on Friday morning, and then really will be quite restricted to hills by the time you get to the weekend. Although, just a hint there over some of the peaks of the Welsh mountains as well as Dartmoor. But yeah, it's going to be feeling cold, and it's going to be staying very mixed, very changeable into the weekend. I won't go into detail at this point on the weekend and beyond, because that'll be covered in the 10-day trend tomorrow. But this gives us a flavour of what we can expect. I talked a lot about the positive North Atlantic Oscillation, and that's basically what this dark blue colour means when you look at the likelihood of various weather patterns for the next 2 weeks. And you can see those dark blues dominate proceedings right the way through the rest of the week and into the weekend. So we've got low pressure over Iceland, higher pressure over the Azores. And if I put how the rainfall compares with average, you can see the rain is most focused across Western Scotland, North West England, West Wales, parts of Northern Ireland. And it's that weather pattern that dominates really right there through the weekend into the start of next week. But then the darker blues start to become less dominant, and we've got a proper mixture of colours going beyond that. Casting our minds back to those probability density function diagrams, remember it was a positive North Atlantic Oscillation through the rest of this week into next week, and then it was hinting at gradually weakening the North Atlantic Oscillation and becoming more neutral, but it was also hinting at more of a chance of blocking highs developing by around mid-March. Now, that's what some of these different colours might suggest. So, Friday the 20th of March, this one suggests greater chance of higher pressure over Europe. And this one here suggests higher pressure coming in from the southwest. But whilst it looks increasingly likely that there'll be some kind of blocking high near the UK, what is the main source of uncertainty at the moment is where exactly. Will it be to the north and northeast of the UK and allow low pressure to dive south and bring outbreaks of rain to southern parts of the UK? Or will it be closer to the UK and force the jet stream to the north of the UK and bring us more settled weather, more of a summer North Atlantic oscillation pattern? So those are the main questions, I think, for the middle parts to the end part of March at the moment. But yeah, for the next week or so, positive North Atlantic Oscillation, lots of very mixed weather. Rain showers, bit of snow for some Friday morning, and that effectively sums it up. I hope you enjoyed this week's deep dive. I guess a bit different to normal, but that's probably enough for me. I've got a birthday party to head off to, so I better be going. I'll see you next time.